Okay, we're going. We're going. Today's going to be a really powerful session for folks who don't understand how the canvas really fundamentally works. We're going to talk about a lot of the mechanics of how inpainting in Invoke works, how to get certain results when you're going through the generation process. We'll do it across different use cases and different industries, and we will answer questions along the way to make sure that everybody really understands what the canvas does and how inpainting works. Okay, so treating today as a teaching opportunity to really go through some of the core functionality, I'm going to start by bringing out an image that we want to transform. I'm going to bring this out. Now, one thing that I've seen some confusion about, and I'm just kind of providing this as a intro to people who aren't familiar. When we're transforming an image, when we're using an existing image as inspiration for something else, and we want to actually make that part of the resulting image content, we are using raster layers. When Invoke is generating, it is looking at the existing image content to see if it needs to transform that content into something else. So if we have this bounding box here, this kind of representative of where our generation is focusing, if that is over an empty area, it's going to generate a completely new image. And so I'll just bring it over and we'll do another mid-century modern house on a hill. So we've got another one over here, right? That is not using our existing raster content because this bounding box is not over our existing image. So I'm going to throw that away. If I wanted to transform this image, I would, invoke over it. The raster layer content is here. And rather than generating something new, it is going to apply our denoising strength to the existing raster layer content. A lower denoising strength will be more like our existing image. A higher denoising strength will, push it into the boundaries still yet unknown. So I'll do 2 generations here just to kind of show that transformation from low changes to more severe changes to ignore my generation completely and do something new. That's kind of what one will mostly do. So we'll look at this, right? We'll compare this to our existing image. When it's a low denoising strength, this was 0.25, we'll see that it made very little changes. When we look at 0.75, we'll see that, the changes were pretty drastic when it comes to the details, right? The house structure is relatively, it's structurally different, even if it's roughly the same. But a lot of the details have been manipulated. When we go all the way to 1, we see almost no structural consistency, but we do see a lot of the core values in the image. We see the sky, we see kind of like this grassy thing. That's largely probably because our prompt is the same. If we said nighttime, and for some reason caps lock is on, but we're just going to go with it. Nighttime, beautiful lights. And contrary to popular belief, if you yell at AI, it does not change a whole lot. But we're going to try doing this and seeing what happens when we have a 1 denoising strength with nighttime beautiful lights. So we can see when that's set to high and our prompt is vastly different, we are getting a different image, even if it's got some elements that are the same. But let's see what happens when we do something a little bit less severe. Doesn't really change much, right? Because it's tethered to our existing initial image. We're kind of stuck a little bit if we're not giving it enough denoising or enough juice to kind of get away and reimagine it. So that's a foundational understanding of how the bounding box and how raster layers work together, and how the denoising strength is ultimately how you're going to control how close to your existing raster layers you want it to be. I will note, since this is probably going to happen at some point in the coming weeks, denoising strength will likely move to a more appropriate location in this side of the screen since it's tied to raster layers. I will take feedback on that in the chat. But we will be looking at ways to more clearly tie the concept of denoising strength to the raster layers that are in your image, because that really is where it's most relevant. Now, one thing that I'm going to talk about that is not often discussed or well known is what happens when our content, when our bounding box is only slightly over an image. What happens in this case where we've got some area that's transparent and some area that is existing image? In this case, we're kind of instructing it to fill in the gaps here. Anytime there's transparency inside of the image, whether it's an empty area like this, or if we come to our raster layer and empty it out like that, we are asking for the AI model to fill in the gaps. And so we'll go ahead and use this as just an example of what it's going to do. Now, where it gets the color information is controlled by the compositing section, and specifically infill. The infill method, if you hover over it, there's a learn more that'll go through different infill techniques and kind of what those will do, how it pulls color and kind of what that will look like. For today, we'll try maybe 2 just to kind of give an example. Llama is going to use image content. So it's going to use what does exist in that raster layer, and it's going to try to fill in with comparable colors and information. It's going to fill in those gaps. Other methods there are just doing that in a different way. It's kind of trying to jam color into those empty areas, and it does denoising on top of that. And so we'll see what happens when we have a low denoising strength here and fill this in. And then we'll go to higher denoising strengths and kind of watch that. So we've got 0.25. When you're doing this type of outpainting, 0.25 is not going to be enough more often than not. More often than not, you need it to be a little bit higher. So you can see what happened is it kind of filled it in. It ultimately, somebody said that the link may need to be looked at, which we will do. But this ultimately is going to fill in some of the color and then apply this much denoising strength to it. If we change the denoising strength to 0, we can actually see what it looks like when it just fills in by itself. So this is what infill is doing before it runs denoising. So you can see it's kind of guessing at rough values and rough colors. It's doing a little bit of the job, but it's not really creating the final image. That's going to be dictated by denoising strength. So typically when I'm doing this type of infill, you're going to want to have a higher denoising strength to allow it to imagine those details. It will reference the infilled area. I typically use something like 0.65, and it will kind of fill in the gaps based on what's missing. So basically, when you're using transparent areas, you are providing an instruction to the system to fill in with similar colors to what already exists, to kind of guess what might be there, and then apply denoising to those areas. The existing image content is not changed except around the boundaries. That is effectively the, I want to put something that doesn't exist in here, and I don't want to provide content or color around it. That's kind of how the infill process works. Typically, more often than not, I'm going to undo a couple of these things here. Typically, what you're going to want to do is instead get a little bit more control, especially if you're trying to go in and specifically add new objects or new content or new colors that don't already exist inside of the content. Somebody's commenting that my image is stuck up in the top left, so I'll move that out. The ways that you're going to apply this technique to specific areas is by using an Inpaint mask. So similar to how the erased area guided where we were filling in that content, the Inpaint mask is going to allow us to select areas that we want to change or modify while keeping other areas the same. When we're doing an Inpaint mask, it actually is using that raster layer content to reimagine the new generation. So in this case, if we want to reimagine this house, we'll kind of select that area. We'll leave our denoising strength there, and we'll watch that inpainting. Somebody said, I've never inpainted by erasing an area of the image and changing the infill. I learned something today. That's good. So we can see that when we're inpainting this, we can compare it to the original. Now our prompt has nighttime beautiful lights, and so the inside is lit up. But we can actually compare and contrast that generation to our original. That is what the Inpaint mask does. It helps us select, and in the combination of our Inpaint mask and denoising strength, we get control over how much we want that area to change. That is how you're doing basic inpainting. I want to vary this a little bit. Now, if my denoising strength is too high and I've got an Inpaint mask, what we're going to find is very often it doesn't really mesh correctly. That's where if you're doing in this case, it looks okay. But when you're doing a generation, you typically want that to be, somewhere in the boundaries of like 0.3 to 0.9, depending on how much, wildness you want to get. In this case, though, it looked fine even at very, very high denoising strength. But I think that's luck more than anything. So the question becomes, what happens if I wanted to, let's say the house was still on caps lock. Maybe I'll change that this time. The house has a magnificent tower erected from it, right? So we're going to throw this away. And, we're imagining this tower kind of coming out from the back of the house. And we're going to, do our invocation and do this denoising. Well, it's not really where I wanted the tower, where I imagined the tower would be. There's like a little bit of a tower over here on the right, but I was really hoping for like this magnificent tower, right? I wanted this thing to be coming out of it. That's where the raster layer information becomes really powerful, because we can actually guide it with both the color and the content itself. So I'm going to add a new raster layer, and I'm going to pick a color here. Maybe I'll pick a kind of orangish, brownish orange. And I'm going to, just draw in this tower. And you can do things that are a little bit artistic, like you can do a little bit of a white highlight on the outside. And we can do, some shadows if we want to on the back side. We can do whatever we want. And then when we're regenerating, it's going to regenerate that area, and it's going to be looking at that content for our regeneration. And now we've got this, tower-like thing. We can also specify what we want that to be. If it is, maybe if we've got a very specific prompt and we're kind of roughing in the color, but it's not really understanding what we're looking for. Let's say, for example, we want a brick tower. We can go to our regional guidance and prompt and say brick tower and kind of join that with this new area. Another technique that you can do is, let's say, for example, you have drawn this in and you want to specifically draw over that and put brick tower. So we've got our brick tower there. If you want to then inpaint that, you can right click your regional guidance, copy regional guidance to a new Inpaint mask, and that'll just pop that over into a new Inpaint mask for you. And then you can just use that. So we'll do that right now and have that reimagine our new tower. And now we're talking. Look at that brick tower. Huh? Look at that brick tower. That's exactly what I was thinking. It fits perfectly with the mid-century modern house, right? Cool. So that's how we're getting some of this control. We're adding new objects when we're manipulating it. We are combining raster layer information, or if we have kind of removed that content, we're relying on infill for that color. And then we're putting that through a denoising process that is controlled by denoising strength. So that's how close we want it to resemble our existing content. In this case, we've got a big blob here. If I bring this lower, it is going to more closely resemble my blob. At 0.45, it might not get very far away. You see, it's like still pretty blob-like. If we go a lot higher, let's go into the boundaries of the insane of 0.95. It's really kind of imagining new content there, and it is only loosely guided by my original input. So we can see the shape has evolved from this blob to our beautiful brick tower. And then when it's very high, it becomes almost like, this looks kind of like a university campus of some sort. There's like a tower there. It's the lookout tower, what have you. But you can see how that denoising strength really pushes things in the direction that you're going, either closer to your image or kind of more towards whatever the prompt would have fit there. If your prompt and your image don't go together, so if I, for example, were to erase all of this and say a large duck, what's going to happen is it's going to kind of like use this content to imagine an entirely new image, and it probably won't fit very well together. Although we do have our regional guidance here, which is we also have the architectural concept prompt. So let's switch this to something like mobile game style, a large duck. That way we're not getting the architectural piece in it at all. This is where you start to get a little bit of the like unhinged outputs, right? Is when your prompt is very different from your underlying image. Effectively, what's happening here is it is using the prompt and ignoring your image, right? We have a prompt, we have a denoising strength of 1, which basically says like mostly ignore my image, and it is then inpainting that one area while doing that. Which is to say, if we didn't have an Inpaint mask and we were just doing this as an image to image, we can see how it turns that into a large duck, right? So we're starting to like create this new character. And if we bring this lower and lower, we can see how using the initial image here, this strange duck, it's got like a hand coming out of it. It's so bizarre. But you can see how it's using the colors of the original image, but ultimately is trying to push all of those colors to match this prompt. And so you really do have to think about how all of these things work together to really make sure that you're seamlessly inpainting the content together. So I'm going to answer some questions now. Someone asked if we can keep the face of a character but change their poses. We can certainly do that. Regional prompt versus main prompt, who wins? The main prompt is going to typically win. So the main prompt is going to, in this case, for example, we can see I had a brick tower right there. I had the brick tower and the regional guidance. But the way to think about regional guidance is it's kind of like a filter that is applied to the main prompt. If we're going to kind of like internalize and anthropomorphize the AI model is looking at this image, it is fuzzing it up, it's turning it into noise, and it's saying, okay, I'm going to imagine a large duck in a bold digital art painting, mobile game artwork, cute animated cartoon style. I'm going to like look for that inside of this image. And if I ever think of adding a brick tower, this is where the brick tower is going to go. The challenge is if your prompt, which is a large duck, bold digital art painting, so on and so forth, would never have a brick tower, that filter is useless. It's not really guiding it at all. It's like, okay, well, I'm not really like thinking about a brick tower here, so there's no brick tower to kind of put in. And so that's where if you're thinking about the regional guidance as guidance, it is guiding elements of your main prompt. It is not forcing certain content in. That's probably the better way to think about that when you're using a prompt. When you use a reference image, it's a little bit different because you are specifically saying, here's an image and here's where it applies. That's a little bit more of a direct injection of content, and you will find the reference image is a lot more powerful than just a prompt. It's doing a regional reference rather than just regional guidance with the prompt. So this is a great question. I think somebody said they want to see a character and they want to see it in different poses. So we will do that. But before I do, I'll do one last explanation here of this process. So if we are switching back to, actually, let's do this. We're going to go to architectural visualization and I'm going to keep our, distant mid-century modern house. I'm going to take the brick tower out. We're just going to do this. And I'm going to switch models. And I think this will also help showcase a little bit the power of denoising strength. So I've got a realistic model and I've changed this to an architectural visualization. I'm trying to turn this into a photo of a house, not just a illustration. So I'm kind of doing a style transfer here. At low strengths, it's going to stay more watercolory. As I get higher and higher, it is going to get further and further away from that watercolor style, but is also going to be changing the structure of the house, right? So you can see as we get, as it's low, it's shifting some of the content, but it's still watercolory. A little bit higher, still watercolory, shifting the content a little bit more. Once we get up to 0.75, it's kind of really starting to change the style, but the structure is also changing. And so these are things that you, they're all interrelated. And as you're doing this stuff, you're starting to think about how the guidance that you're giving it, the image content, is controlling or not controlling the image generation process. As you go higher on that denoising strength, you're getting further and further away from your original image, which can be useful. It's useful for reimagining things, but may be a little bit too much for what you're trying to do, depending on how you're trying to do it. Now, if we wanted to transform this image and keep the structure the same, what we can do is we can copy this to a control layer. That control layer is going to be something that we're using to actually guide the structure of this. And I am going to use we'll just do a simple canny. The canny is going to kind of outline all of the big pieces of this. And that's going to kind of say, this is the structure of our generation, kind of color inside the lines. And so we'll apply that. I'll bring my weight down a little bit. I'm not going to be super strict on this. This isn't a sketch or anything like that. Again, this control layer is effectively telling it that as it's going through that denoising process, as it's reimagining this, and again, all controlled by the denoising strength, how much denoising is happening, but as it's going through that, it should adhere to this reasonably, but not strictly, inside of these lines, so roughly the same shape. And it should do that and kind of follow that guidance for the first 65% of that process. So it's kind of, as it's going through that initial composition, as it's kind of reimagining and regenerating, it's coordinating all of that attention in the right spot. It's kind of keeping that control where we've designated it. So I'm going to do that here, and I'm going to keep my denoising strength high. And ideally, what we will find is that it will transform enough to get to a photorealistic image, but that control layer is actually going to keep it reasonably similar to our original content. I would say it's closer, but we might want to go a little bit higher on the denoising strength. And again, that control layer is keeping the structure here. So now we've got a photorealistic image of this house, and it's structured the same. We've kept the structure the same by using the control layer, and we've allowed the denoising strength to transform the style. So hopefully that helps a little bit with kind of like how that all works. Now, this is where Invoke's Inpainting has a lot of power, because now that we have this photorealistic image, I can come in and I can do Inpainting on parts and pieces of it. So let's go back actually to this photorealistic one, and let's do that same transformation, but I'm only going to transform the house. So it's going through that transformation that we did, but we're filtering it just to the house, because I think this will be an interesting exercise to explain how this is working. The structure is kept similar through our control layer. We're only regenerating the part that's related to the house, and we're using this kind of photorealistic prompt to do so. You can see that now we have a more photorealistic house, but it's in the context of this kind of like watercolor setting. So it's a pretty cool way to kind of like iterate, keep the control, and also still do targeted transformations. If we want, we can kind of come in and do some cool like replacement of certain elements that are, a little bit more watercolory, and kind of push them towards more photorealistic look. But in doing so, we're kind of like meshing the styles a little bit. We've got some elements that look real, but it is almost kind of this like surreal watercolor environment, right? So it's kind of parts and pieces of this that are pretty cool. So we've got good questions coming in. So someone said, instead of higher denoising, can you also do a second and third pass at a lower denoising strength? That's a great technique. If you don't want to vary the structure a lot, but you do want to kind of like nudge it along towards the prompt, you can do multiple generations at a lower denoising strength. What that'll do is it will kind of like iterate on itself over and over, slightly transforming it until you get to a much more stylistically aligned generation, but one that ultimately kind of coheres to your structure without using a control layer. Someone asked, if you move the bounding box closer to the inpainted region, would it push it even more to photorealism? I would say my guess is yes. Let's do that here. So we're going to, we'll just go closer to this like region right here, and we'll do inpainting on some of these like landscape elements. So we're going to do that. And the reason why this will likely push it a little bit more towards the photorealism, as has been called out, is because there's less of this overall context in the image that's guiding it back towards a watercolor. So when the model is generating this image, and we generated just this one part as photorealism, it's trying to make it fit into the broader image. It's trying as much as possible to make it coherent. And so what we end up with is this, there's much more photorealism in that one part, but it's also kind of pulling in a little bit of the style around it when it's the full bounding box. When we're focusing on one small area like this, we're constraining the attention of the AI model to just one area. We're basically saying you can ignore everything outside of this box. So it's like zoom in and focus on just this one area. And because we already have some photorealistic elements and it has less stuff to conflict with it, my guess is that we will ultimately see this stuff will look a lot more photorealistic. We got a couple questions coming in. Someone said, is there something like a loop or cycle function? The loop or cycle function is called U. You can do that multiple times and cycle that through. You could also create a workflow if you wanted to do that and automate a process where it does 3 loops of iterations on an image. That would just be in the workflow tab, not the inpainting. But we can see that it's got a lot more photorealistic landscape elements now that we've kind of focused in on this area. And again, that's because the bounding box is a little bit closer. So just for comparison, that's kind of what it looks like. I'm going to accept this and then do a little trick here. We're going to take this area out. I'm going to regenerate this with the full context. We'll do the same thing. And then we'll be able to compare these two directly in our canvas, which will be fun. So we'll accept that. And then I'm going to take that one up and we'll compare these two. So when the bounding box was super close, we got this left one, right? And it's definitely more like photorealistic. When it was further away and it had more of that watercolor aesthetic, we can see that that watercolor aesthetic actually bled into our generation a little bit. It drove it a little bit away from that photorealism that we were going for. And these are all kind of like the intricacies of understanding how these AI models are trying to make sense of everything, how they're reimagining certain parts and pieces, but ultimately understanding how this works is how this becomes a tool for you as a professional or creative, because you actually know what you're doing and how the choices that you're making are going to influence that outcome. This is not delegating all of these decisions away to some AI. It is ultimately you functionally using these as a tool that's guiding it towards the generation. Someone said, sometimes when I generate with the bounding box in a specific area, I get a different, I get a totally different generation than the rest of the image. Why is that? I think that probably it goes back to if your denoising strength is too high and your prompt is different. So this is kind of where we earlier in today's session regenerated the duck, right? If your prompt is different and your denoising strength is too high, it is going to try to generate the image in your prompt and ignore more of what is in your image. And so getting the denoising strength right and mapping that and using control layers is ultimately how you get and constrain the generation to that piece. Someone asked, how much role does model play in that? Oh, these are really, really good questions. Okay. Oof, man, I'm trying to figure out how not to get super technical and super complicated, trying to keep it accessible. The model, the analogy I like to use is that the model is a specific understanding of language. It's a specific dictionary of what words mean. And so the same way that if I change my prompt dramatically to a different style or a different subject, that can have a big influence on what it thinks it's looking at. Changing a model can also have that same impact because you're actually changing all the definitions. Even if you have the same prompt, you're taking all the definitions and saying, actually look at that definition of that word instead. They can have overlap where, it's generally the same understanding, or it can be wildly different. It can be a very different understanding of what watercolors are, what artwork is. It can change a lot of the interrelated relationships between those words as well. And so models can have a significant influence. That's why typically, if you are looking to get control over structure and you're also looking to do significant changes, using a control layer while you're doing the generation, even when you're using Inpainting, allows you to kind of like iterate and change all of those things without having the structure get wildly changed as well. These are really, really good questions. Yeah, someone said, I usually use the bounding box to regenerate in high definition a specific region. That is a good idea. That is how it's to be used. It's how it's supposed to be used. So let's go ahead and switch our models back to this more illustrative model, and I'll do this illustrative prompt, and we will do a, what kind of character are we gonna play with today? I think we've got time for one more like part of the session because we spent about 30 minutes on that. So we're gonna do character. We're gonna do a character in different poses and kind of try animating. Someone said business, and another person said piggies, which makes me want to kind of like fuse those concepts together. Everyone is now saying, yeah, business piggies. Okay, so we're going to say a pig anthropomorphized standing in a business suit, irritated expression. Okay, so we're generating this without any guidance. We're not giving it any context at all. It's just generating the image. And then I'll show you a trick. So I've got in my head what I'm wanting to see and what I'm hoping to get out of this. I imagine that it's going to be slightly different than what I'm imagining. It's just how it works. Now, when we're generating over a transparent area, denoising strength doesn't matter. When we're using a transparent area without existing images, infill doesn't matter either. It's just generating a new image. But we now have our illustrative piggy in a business suit. His expression's not particularly irritated, but we'll fix that shortly. Some fun stuff here. People are now throwing out so many ideas. I really enjoy all of these ideas. Someone said a pig in a suit in my head is a gangster pig. We could certainly do that. But I think we're doing okay with this. And this isn't too far away from what I wanted. But I'm going to do some fun things here to kind of give myself a character concept sheet. Hold on, because we're about to go to places that nobody has gone before on a studio session. All right, I'm going to accept this. I'm going to select my raster layer. I'm going to do select object, and I'm going to take this little piggy is coming along with us for a ride. We're going to select him out. And yeah, we'll apply that. So now I've got our little piggy. I'm going to transform him, bring him down over here. I am going to apply that. I'm going to create a new raster layer. I'm moving with you at the speed of light. Follow along. I'm going to make that raster layer the background. I'm going to pick a rectangle. I'm going to press D to switch to a pure white. And I'm going to create a pure white background as a background layer. For my sanity, I'm going to crop that to the bounding box. And now we are started. We're started. We got this little piggy here. What I want to do now is I want to duplicate this. And I am going to pop this out and erase this. Give myself a little head. I'm going to duplicate this again and duplicate this again. Kind of creating myself a little character sheet here, right? And this just gives me some room to play around on the canvas. I'm kind of like trying to, give myself some areas to toy with when I'm doing Inpainting. Someone called out that there's a little bit here we're going to take out. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to regenerate all of this just for the sake of having like a clean character sheet. So we'll do character concept sheets, expressions, and maybe I'll make this guy just a little bit bigger. And he got a little bit pixelated because we brought him down and then brought him back up, but that's okay. That is okay. We're going to transform this at about a 0.7, and then we'll get in and start doing some tweaking. All of these expressions are the same, but that's okay. We'll fix that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come in and I'm going to just focus on this face. Expression concept art. And I'm going to say angry plus because I really want it to be angry. And now I'm going to Inpaint and we'll see how much I need to get some control over this. We're going to give it a try with just Inpainting this expression, because there's a lot of suggestions here of like, ooh, angry, and he's like showing some that's kind of like manic angry. Those are like insane angry. We don't know that we like that. I'm going to say fangs in the negative prompt, and we'll say teeth in the negative prompt, and yeah, I don't know. I'm insane. I don't want him insane. I just want him to be angry. So we're going to regenerate that face and just get him angry. That's kind of like evil pig. We'll give ourselves another one here just to see what happens when we're regenerating this. That's okay. I think that's fine to have that. That looks pretty good. I like that. I like that one. Yeah, someone said maybe stern instead of angry. I'm gonna keep that, even though it's got teeth. We could come back and fiddle with that a little bit if we wanted to, but we'll see what happens when we regenerate this one. Maybe we'll do sad and disappointed. We'll do that plus as a group. I mean, fangs, teeth, insane. We'll leave those in the negative prompt just to see. That's not sad or disappointed. We're going to do happy in the negative prompt. We want to make sure that it gets far enough away. It's too happy for me still. Sad and disappointed. We're going to increase that. Let's go. Let's get really sad. It's kind of more neutral expression than sad. We might need to do some stuff here. We might need to fiddle around with this. What do I want to do? How do I want to get it sad? I feel like I could draw some stuff to guide it, but maybe I'll just turn up our denoising strength a little bit and see if that gets us where we want to go. It's kind of like King of Queens face more than sad and disappointed. I'm not sold on that. Yes. The chat is not convinced that he is sad or disappointed. We're gonna try sorrowful expression. Try sorrowful expression. Still kind of more King of Queens. Sad, tears, sorrow, weeping, in all caps. I'm just kind of emphasizing, and it's not going to actually do anything when I do. Man, it really doesn't understand sad. Oh, there we go. Okay, that's better. It's closer at least. I think his eyes probably need to be tweaked a little bit to be a little bit more like our eyes over here, at least color wise. And so this is where the raster layer comes in, right? We've got a different expression, and we want the expression to be different, but we want the colors to be the same. So we're going to take this like brown, maybe just orange here. I'm going to bring it over, and I'm going to change the opacity down a little bit. And what I want to do is I want to actually just like change that to orange, right? Kind of guiding the color there. And with my Inpaint mask, I'm going to select those areas, and I want to keep it closer to my image. I want to keep it closer to that color that I just gave it. So I'm going to bring the denoising strength down, and we'll do a denoising run. See if that keeps it closer to our color. Now it's just kind of doing a little bit of blue here. It might be because of our sad, tears, sorrow, weeping. So we're going to do, I'm going to try not telling it what color it is. If we tell it what color it is, it's really going to make it that color. I really just want to use the raster layer content here. There we go. Okay. So we use the denoising strength of 0.4. We brought that down. We used our raster layer to give it a little bit of a color suggestion, and then it kind of blended that together. Someone asked a really good question. What's the keyboard stroke to switch the Inpaint mask? I'm going to say it depends. When you start a new canvas, when you hit this button and reset it, you will have one Inpaint mask layer that is bookmarked. That bookmark makes the Q hotkey your friend. When you press Q, it'll switch to whatever layer you have bookmarked back and forth. You can change the layer that you have bookmarked. You can say, I want to add, let's say, add a control layer here. I want that to be my bookmark. And then I'm working on a raster layer, hit Q, it's going to go to that. Hit Q again, it goes back to my raster layer. So Q is kind of like a hot swap. Typically though, Inpaint mask is one of the more common bookmarks that you're going to want, because that's where you're going to switch between other layers and Inpainting. You're going to do some tweaking on layers, you're going to go back to Inpainting. You're going to do some tweaking on layers, you go back to Inpainting. So that's the secret hotkey there. Someone asked, to keep the same design, would it not be better to gen all three expressions at the same time with regional prompts for each expression? That's certainly a way to do it. That is a way, and it would be a good way to do it. It's not what I have done here in this case. Part of that is I am going in and kind of like doing these tweaks on a per face basis. And so that just gives me a little bit more control. You certainly could do regional prompting and kind of regenerate all those at the same time. It's just going to require a little bit more finesse between managing the global prompt and managing the regional prompt. It's really just a workflow question and how you want to navigate it, but you certainly could do that. Our last face here. All right, give me an expression. Chat, give me an expression. We're going to add that expression in. What are we doing? Surprised. Someone said surprised. Surprised. Someone has said sleep. We'll do surprised. Shocked. Mouth agape. Wide eyes. Cool. We're going to try this. Now this will be a good lesson here for us. We're going to do this. And I imagine we're going to have a hard time. So we're going to do 0.7. I only say I imagine we're going to have a hard time because the mouth is not super open already. I do like this guy's face. I think this is definitely like the good, like, oh, type face, but it's not really like the shocked and awed. Someone said open mouth is better than mouth agape. I guess my SAT words of the day. Either way, I don't think that with the denoising strength that we have right now that we're going to get a lot of that from this while still keeping things the same. And that's because if we look underneath, we can see the color values here are dark in this area. And when we're doing denoising at this strength, at least, it's going to try to keep those values. It's going to try to keep that. And we can actually see that, you know, there's like some shift in those values, but it's not significant. It's kind of like all staying in that one spot. And so another way to think about denoising strength is how much freedom to move colors around and shift values and all that kind of stuff are you giving the model. Two ways we can do this, you know, kind of like get more control is, you know, we can like say that we like this set of eyes and then focus our denoising on the mouth and turn our denoising up and see if we can get it to do more of a shift with that kind of like way. But I think we're going to find that, you know, we lose a lot of our consistency here with our structure and color. You can see it's like almost trying to make a new image because our denoising strength is so high. And so we have to kind of balance this between being too high and too low. In this case, I don't think that this is, it's not really what I want. See, I can't get it quite right with the denoising strength and all that kind of stuff. This is where using the raster layer to guide the content generation is going to be super helpful. So I'm going to take that away. I'm going to hide my Inpaint mask real quick. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of rough in where I want this to be. And I might duplicate this real quick. I'm going to hide it. I'm going to paint on here. And then I'm going to turn this one on. Just going to use the bottom of this mouse. All right. Oh, there we go. Look at that. And then I'll blend this a little bit. And now I actually have like a very rough in color here. I'm going to do Inpainting, and I can do this at a lower denoising strength. I can get away with doing a low denoising strength because I've got the values and the colors where I want them. And so by doing that at a lower denoising strength, I'm giving the guidance using the structure that I've given it, or the raster layer structure that I've given it. And now it's kind of applying that to this image. That is how I would go about getting a lot of this control, is when we're trying to do like dramatic changes to objects or to facial expressions, we're actually going to go in and provide kind of like the initial rough in of the color and the structure. And then the denoising process can kind of glom on to that and just nudge it a little bit closer to coherent and stylistically aligned output. Now, in this case, we've got, you know, a little bit of a weirdness here on this mouth. I'm going to probably like delete some of that. Hide this. So I'm just kind of like perfecting this a little bit here. I'll do that. I don't know that I want to do that. Maybe I've gone too far here. And maybe what I want to do is just kind of like paint over this actually. And I'll do a little bit more there. Turn my Inpaint mask back on so we can see it. Turn my denoising strength even a little bit lower so that it doesn't reimagine too many details here. And now we've got our shocked expression. Right? Wow. Look at that. All right. Let's see what questions we've got. Someone asked, have you tried comparing SD to SDXL to Flux to SD 3.5? Wonder if the more natural prompting models work better. Flux does not do this type of style very well at the base model. SD 3.5 does seem to have better stylistic interpretation, but it needs some fine tuning, to be candid, on structural stuff. It doesn't do like a lot of the hands very well. I think SDXL right now, in my opinion, is still my go-to for a lot of things because it's a much more mature ecosystem. It has the full set of features for control. And, you know, it's something that I got used to working with. I do think that over time, at Flux and SD 3.5 will evolve and kind of become more robust. But for now, that's kind of where I've landed doing the type of examples and demonstrations that I'm doing today. Somebody asked, what model is this? This is something I'm working on. This is further fine tuning and iteration on the custom XL model. This is custom illusion. Custom XL I found sometimes was a little bit less artistic. It did realistic really well, but it didn't do some of the artistic things that I wanted as much. And so I've been compiling and fine tuning that. And that's the illusion model that we're using right now. I will eventually release it at some point once it is fine tuned sufficiently to my satisfaction so that people can use it. Is SD 3.5 coming in a future update? Yes, it is. How much of an improvement compared to Flux? It is not really an improvement over Flux. It is different. It has different strengths and different weaknesses. They are same generation, different purposes, I would say. Has there been any recent updates to Invoke Training? We have not expanded Invoke Training to include Flux or SD 3.5 yet. It is something that we will plan on doing at some point in the future. But for now, it is the most recent update was we added model merging capabilities into Invoke Training as scripts, and it does a lot of cool stuff there. Someone asked, is Flux ControlNet implemented? Yes. Someone asked, what do you use to fine tune your models? The Invoke Training repo is what I use. I think I got through all the questions. All right, so let's do one more edit here of our business piggy. We're going to give him a coffee cup. Someone mentioned they wanted to see a coffee cup. And so what I'm probably going to do, just for the sake of consolidating all this, I'm going to merge it down. And, you know, I'm just going to delete all our old stuff because I don't want to keep it around right now. And then I'm going to go to our raster layer and select object. We'll select our pig. I am going to save that as a new raster layer. I'm going to bring that raster layer out. Oops. And bring him down. And we're just going to edit and work on this smaller version of him. So we're going to come down and we are going to give ourselves some suggestions for our model. going to paint over this hand. And I'm trying to ask myself what's the easiest way to give this. I think probably do a quick, probably it's going to be better if I just draw this thing. I'll play around with it that way. Yeah, all right, I'll do this momentarily here. Yeah, okay. And we're going to have to do modifying this probably the wrong way. I should have created a new layer for what I just did, but it'll be okay. All right, so I'm just drawing in that rough sketch, right? And we are going to add a regional guidance here, coffee cup, and holding coffee cup, and we're going to paint that region. This is really just to give some guidance to it. We're going to do a pig anthropomorphized, standing in a business suit, holding a coffee, steaming hot. I'm going to take out those negative prompts because that's not really relevant. And just again, to re-emphasize this, I'm going to copy the regional guidance to a new Inpaint mask. So that's just going to automatically select that in my Inpaint mask. And I'm going to do a low denoising, a medium denoising, and a higher denoising. We'll kind of see how that transforms that. Somebody said I would really, really like to see a future live session or tutorial about training models in Invoke and training and fine-tuning models in general. We're seeing thumbs ups there. So that's probably on the agenda. We'll go through the training process. So low strength with my sketch. Stayed too close to my sketch. It's too bad sketch-like. As I get higher and higher, it shifts it more and more. And then this is our point, I think 0.8 denoising strength. And I would say that looks pretty good. I like that. And now he's holding his coffee cup. And we can kind of call that a day on him. Now, if we wanted to change his pose, you know, something that we can do here is, you know, we can, how do we want to do this? I'll duplicate him. And we're going to erase this left half. And let's say we wanted his like arm to be in a different position. What I can do is I can erase, just using kind of like a faux arm here. I'm going to transform this. That's why I'm getting kind of like the similar proportions to where I have it. Apply that transform. Then I'm going to come in on the base layer and fix this up. And then we'll get our hand and kind of, you know, like rough in a hand or something approximating a hand. And we'll go back to our Inpaint mask and select all of that. And then just do, here. Oh, we got no region selected. He is waving a hand. Somebody said time check. It was Glimmer. He's keeping me honest here. We're near the end. We're near the end. We're closing out here. We're going to see our kind of hand, and then we'll be done. Yeah, we'll leave it as that. Just kind of like the claw. the claw hand. So that's kind of what I drew. It's kind of accurate to what I drew. And it also gave him a little bit of like a smoking, steaming tail, which I'm amused by that tail. So it's steaming hot, a steaming hot pig. And he's got a steamy tail. Obviously, if I want to fix that, I come in and I erase all evidence of our steamy pig. We can do the same for his tail if we don't want that. And now we've got our pig holding coffee, clawing goodbye. And with that, we have our beautiful pig expression and character concept sheet. We've got a lot of consistency between it because we reused pieces of this. And hopefully you can use this in your projects. But thank you all for attending today, and we'll see you all around. Bye-bye.